Dear listeners, we would love to get to know you better. Please write in the comments which country and city you are watching us from. Thank you.
I stood by the window and watched as the car pulled onto the driveway, turned right, and disappeared down the street. I was surprised at how little I felt. Shouldn't I have been more upset? I had just seen 10 years of my life drive away. Wasn't I supposed to feel something? Shouldn't there have been something more than just a shrug in the thought, well, I guess I should go and take care of that dripping faucet? Turning and heading toward the kitchen, I replayed the events of the last half hour in my mind. When I'd returned home from work, I found my wife, Peggy, sitting at the kitchen table with a full glass of wine. I knew something had happened the moment I saw her. First, she was home earlier than me, which was unusual since she typically arrived from work half an hour to an hour later. Second, there was nothing cooking on the stove. And finally, the glass of wine Peggy rarely drank. Before I could say anything, she asked me to sit down because she had something to tell me. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat across from her. Rob, I know you see it too. Over the past 6 months, something has been off between us. I have no idea why we've been drifting apart. I don't know if it's about me or about you, but something isn't right. I've tried to talk about it, but all I heard was that we're just going through a rough patch and things will get better. I've decided that we need to separate. I'm not talking about divorce, just a break for a while. I think I need some space, Rob. I need to leave, take a look at my life, and figure out what's causing this rift between us. You can use the time to think too. Come on, Peg, it's not as bad as you're making it out to be. Sure, we've got some problems, what marriage doesn't? But two people can't fix their issues by staying apart and not talking. Talking won't help, Rob. You only see one problem in our marriage. In your opinion, the only issue we have is that we're not making love. Your solution to the problem is for me to undress and let you do whatever you want with me. But for me, it's something deeper. We're not making love anymore because I don't want to. We're not holding each other close anymore because I don't want you to touch me. And I don't know why I don't want you to touch me. I still love you. I love you just as much as I did the day we got married, but something isn't right, and I don't know what it is. I need some space, Rob. I need to be alone to figure this out. So, you either throw 10 years of marriage out the window? No, Rob, I just think we need to spend some time apart. I've already packed my things into the car. I'll stay with my sister until I find a place of my own. I'll call you once a week to stay in touch. She stood up and said, I have to go. I told Mary I'd be there by 7. Then she turned and left without even kissing me goodbye, and that in itself told me everything I needed to know. It didn't take long for the word to spread that Peggy and I had separated. Most of our friends sympathized with me and did their best to cheer me up. Peggy called me once a week to ask how I was doing, and I would tell her I was managing. Then I'd ask how she was, and she would say she was doing fine. After that, I would ask if she was ready to come home, and she would reply that she wasn't, not yet. Peg had been gone for 6 weeks when I started hearing troubling things, like the rumor that she had a boyfriend. I didn't want to believe it. I wanted to believe what she had told me, that she just needed some time alone to sort out her thoughts, and that she would come back home afterward. But the rumors persisted, so I decided to investigate them myself. I would find out where Peg was staying, do a little digging, and put an end to the speculation. However, no one could, or would, tell me where she was staying. Either they didn't know, or they didn't want to say. I started to suspect there was something fishy going on. One evening, I was having dinner with my friend Tom and his wife, Tanya. I shared my concerns and let it slip that I was considering hiring a private investigator to find Peg and either confirm or debunk the rumors that I noticed the way Tom glanced at Tanya, and she gave him a slight nod. Save your money, Rob, Tom said. The rumors are true. Most of the people who know you are aware of what's going on, but they don't want to tell you. What exactly? That Peggy left you to live with Adam White. Adam White? Who the hell is Adam White? I've never even heard of him. He works with Peggy, and she just up and left me to live with him. That doesn't make any sense. If she was going to do that, why didn't she just divorce me? What's with the whole separation nonsense? Rob, you know Peggy. She plans everything. She makes backup plans and then backup plans for the backup plans. She's been seeing White for almost a year, and I suspect she set it all up so she could come back home if things with White didn't work out. And everyone knows this, but no one told me. My God, what a wonderful group of friends I have. I stood up, tossed my napkin onto the middle of the table, and said, "I'll figure it out myself," then walked out. On the way home, I thought about what I had just learned. No intimacy with Peg for over a year because she didn't want to be with me. For more than a year, she hadn't held me close because she didn't want me to touch her. And all that time, she was cheating on me. Like a fool, I stayed home, played the good boy, and behaved myself while waiting for my unfaithful adulteress to come back. And all my friends, my wonderful friends, knew about it. They just let me sit there, staring at the walls and waiting. Well, the waiting is over. The next morning, I arranged a meeting with Corliss Detective Agency and gave them a retainer. I told them where Peg and her boyfriend worked and instructed them to dig up all the dirt they could find for me. Then, I went home and started making a list of everything I needed to do to cut ties with Peg. I would wait until I received the report from the agency, but once I had it, I'd have my list, and I'd be ready. Once the list was done, I leaned back in my chair and thought about something else I needed to address. I hadn't had sex in almost 16 months, first because Peg had refused me for a year, and then because of our separation. I had been a completely faithful husband, but now that I knew what Peg had been doing, I was damn sure I wasn't going to remain celibate any longer. I sat at the kitchen table, sipping a beer and making plans to end my long dry spell, when I remembered what Tom had said about Peg. She had planned it all. After living with her for so long, I knew it was true. To me, this meant she already had plans in place, plans based on how she thought I would react, and the biggest plan of all was how to stick it to me if she decided that living with White was what she really wanted, that I could see she was watching me, ready to use anything against me in the divorce if I went out and had so much as a fling. Suddenly, the list I had made felt useless because she might have planned my reaction exactly as I had envisioned it. A new list started to take shape. I realized that many of the things I wanted to do needed to be done immediately, not left until the last minute. And there were certain actions I could take to turn the tables on Peg and make her bleed, metaphorically speaking. I smiled at the thought and wondered if she had a plan for that scenario as well. The next morning, I went to the bank to deposit my check, and while I was there, I checked the safe deposit box that Peg and I shared. From the logbook, I saw that Peg had been checking the box at least once a week. It was clear to me that she was keeping an eye on me, and that at the first sign of an attack from me, she would retaliate. I thought about it for a minute, then took 5 certificates of deposit out of their plastic sleeves, went upstairs, and used the bank's copier to make copies of all 5. I placed the copies back into the sleeves and returned them to the box. If Peg didn't take the certificates out of the sleeves to inspect them, she would never know they had been swapped. Then, knowing that Peg was keeping tabs on me, I took my passport out of the box and casually mentioned to the bank clerk as she returned the box that I was heading to Mexico for a fishing trip. I walked out of the bank with the 5 original certificates of deposit in my pocket. I started visiting the bank about twice a week, and during each visit, I cashed 1 certificate of deposit, paid the early withdrawal penalty, and hid the cash when I returned home. I didn't believe in credit cards, thinking they could easily lead to trouble. As a result, the only cards in my name were in American Express, which required the full balance to be paid off when the bill arrived, a few gas company credit cards, and a Visa card with a low limit. Peg, on the other hand, had a good half-dozen credit cards in her name, some with high limits. I knew the limits because I paid the bills every month, made a list of the account balances, and filed it away. I sat down and made a list of everything I wanted, then went online. Over the next 2 weeks, I started spending money on Peg's credit cards. By the time I left, she'd be saddled with credit card debt, and I intended to ensure it was significant. I upgraded my computer and got a new Dell with all the bells and whistles. I bought a Remington 700 rifle on eBay and a bunch of other things, like a digital camera and a cutting-edge phone that did everything except make breakfast. The house belonged to Peg. It had been left to her by her parents, so I had no legal claim to it. However, we had used it as collateral to open a line of credit when we installed the pool and hot tub, and both of our names were on the account. We had paid off everything we borrowed, but the credit line was still open. If I timed things right, I could act before she realized what I was doing. I used to wonder why, when she decided we needed a trial separation, she packed her things and left me in her house instead of asking me to leave. Now I understood. As long as I was in the house, it was clear I was waiting for her to return. From her perspective, I viewed the separation as temporary. Next, I closed my 401k at work, paid the penalty, and withdrew the money. Then I leaned back in my chair and waited for the report from the private investigator. The only thing I couldn't figure out was how to finish everything discreetly. I couldn't risk anyone observing what I was doing. I decided that on weekends I'd have to go fishing out of town. She knew I enjoyed fishing and that I went often, and based on the catches I brought home, she knew I genuinely went fishing. Because of this, I doubted she'd hire a private detective to follow me. After all, she didn't need to get too invested, right? Wasn't I the fool in this situation? Hadn't she been stringing me along for more than a year? It was Friday, and I was just about to leave work when Tanya called and asked me to stop by their place on my way home. I tried to decline, but she insisted it was very important, so I agreed. When I arrived, she let me in and led me to the living room, where I found Tom sitting in an armchair. He stood up, extended his hand, and I shook it. Then he invited me to sit and make myself comfortable while he went to grab me a beer. "Rob, Tanya needs to talk to you, and you should know that I'm 100% on board with what she's about to say." He left the room and headed to the kitchen. I gave Tanya a questioning look, and she said, "You're going to need a beer." Tom returned, handed me a Bud Light, and said, "I've got some errands to run, and I probably won't be back before midnight. See you later." He headed to the front door, and I heard it open and then closed behind him. The sound of the door closing seemed to be Tanya's cue to start the conversation. "Rob, you heard us when you ran out on us that evening after dinner." I started to say something, but she raised her hand and said, "Let me finish. You were right, but it still hurt." In our defense, I can only say that we like you a lot and never wanted to hurt you. Things are a bit complicated because Peg is our friend too, and we hope she pulled herself together and come back home to you where she belongs. We know you love her, or at least you used to, but we weren't sure if that love was enough for you to forgive her, so we stayed quiet. If you two got back together, you wouldn't need to worry about forgiveness or forgetting. That's our apology, but it's only part of the reason Tom and I wanted you to stop by. We know you, Rob, and we know what kind of man you are. You wouldn't cheat on your wife any more than you'd rob a bank. So how long has it been since you last had sex? The question caught me off guard. For the first time, I really noticed what Tanya was wearing: a low-cut blouse that showed off her ample cleavage, a short skirt, and high heels that accentuated her incredible legs. Friend or not, I couldn't help but feel a spark of tension. Then I remembered Tom's comment, "I'm 100% on board," and an idea began to form about where this was headed. In a hushed voice, I said it had been a year and a half. She leaned closer, and I caught a glimpse down her blouse as she huskily said, "I'd like to change that. Rob, Tom is my friend, Tanya. I can't do this to him." I started to stand, but she grabbed my hand and pulled me back down. "Tom's fine with it, Rob. That's why he left, to give us some time alone. This isn't pity sex or mercy sex, Rob. Tom and I have talked about this for months. You have something we need, and I'm hoping I can help you and you can help us. I don't understand. Honestly, Rob, Tom is infertile, and we want a child. We want you to give me that." I was stunned. I sat there, staring at her in disbelief. When I finally found my voice, I said, "You just said you know I wouldn't cheat on Peg." "Yes," she said, placing her hand on the bulge in my pants. "But that was before you found out what Peg's been doing. Now you know you're free from the vows you made to her. But why me? We want it to be someone we know, not some anonymous donor. We also want the father to be part of the child's life. You be the godfather and always be there as Uncle Rob." That doesn't make any sense, Tanya. It does. What if something happens to me and Tom? Who better to take care of the child than Uncle Rob? On the other hand, God forbid, if the child ever needed a liver transplant or something like that, could we count on an anonymous donor? And even if we found one, would they help? If we ended up on a waiting list, how long would we have to wait to find a suitable match? No, Rob, we've thought this through. We want you to be part of our family. Besides, she added with a playful smirk, "You're not going to tell me you don't find me attractive, are you?" She squeezed the hard bulge in my pants and said, "This speaks volumes about your reaction." Then she knelt in front of me and pulled down my zipper. "Being the father of my child has its perks, Rob," she said. "We'll have to make love many, many times to ensure I get pregnant. I won't limit you to just the days when I'm most fertile. In fact, I won't even tell you when those days are. This could take weeks, Rob, weeks and weeks, and you've gone a long time without sex. We'll be helping each other, she added. After such a long break, I won't last very long, I told Tanya, trying to pull away. But she held on to me firmly, her movements growing faster and more deliberate. I'm about to lose it, I groaned, and she tightened her grip on me. That extra bit of pressure sent me over the edge. As I began to relax, she cleaned up and said with a sly smile, now we can head to the bedroom and get serious about making a baby. Any lingering doubts I had vanished the moment I let go. I got up and followed her to the bedroom that we undressed, and Tanya lay down on the bed. From what I've read, she said, the hotter the passion, the more receptive I'll be to your essence. No tender, romantic nonsense, Rob. Treat me like a woman you can't resist, someone you desire completely. Make my blood boil, make me scream, make me beg. Come closer, she whispered. I want to feel you. I climbed onto the bed. The second time lasted longer than the first, and when it was over, Tanya adjusted the pillow beneath her to ensure nothing was wasted. Watching her, I regained my determination, and before long, I was ready again. The next round was more intense. She pressed herself against me, her fingers wrapped around my back, and we shared the moment exhausted but satisfied. We finished, and she adjusted the pillow once more before turning to me with a playful glint in her eyes. One more time, Rob, she said with a teasing smile. I want you to keep going. I kissed Tanya one last time before heading home, and just before she let me out the door, she kissed me again and thanked me for what I had just done. I'd love to do this every day until I get pregnant, but Tom is used to making love 3 or 4 times a week, and while he's okay with our arrangement, I won't disrespect him. Call me tomorrow, okay? The whole way home, I thought about what had just happened. As I pulled into the driveway, it occurred to me that if Peg was watching me, she might notice my visits to Tom and Tanya, see that Tom left, and realize I stayed for several hours the next morning. I called Tanya and explained my concerns. She reassured me, saying not to worry because Tom hadn't really left. Instead, he had gone down to his basement workshop and stayed there until I left. This information gave me pause. It was one thing to make love to Tanya when Tom wasn't home, but could I do it knowing he was in the house? Tanya must have guessed what I was thinking because she said, Don't worry, Rob, everything will be fine. I promise. Later that day, Tom called me and invited me out for a drink after work. It was a bit awkward. Imagine sitting across from a guy you've known for 20 years, who's a good friend, and whose wife you've just been intimate with his full consent that he must have sensed what I was thinking because he got straight to the point. I know this is awkward for you, Rob. Hell, buddy, it's awkward for me too. But I need to talk to you about the situation we're in. First off, and I told you this when I left you and Tanya alone, I'm 100% on board with all of this. That said, Tanya didn't tell you the whole truth. I know she talked to you about wanting a child and about me being infertile, but she didn't tell you everything. Honestly, buddy, I'm not capable of having sex. I haven't been able to make love to Tanya for over a year. My God. That explained why she was so passionate last night. She'd been holding back for a long time. And her telling me she didn't want to hurt Tom. That was her way of covering for his inability. She didn't want me to know he was impotent because she didn't want me to think less of him as a man. What a difference between her and Peg. Tanya put Tom first, even in difficult circumstances, while Peg only ever thought about herself. I don't know if it hit you last night, Tom continued, but Tanya is a very passionate woman. My inability to perform has been driving her up the wall. She's been trying her best to hold herself together, Rob, but sooner or later, she was going to cheat on me. I know that sounds harsh, but it was inevitable. I know she loves me and would do everything she could to hide her infidelity from me. How could I not notice? If she'd slept with someone, it would have been obvious because she wouldn't be so frustrated anymore. I love her, Rob. That woman is my life. If I didn't have her, I'd just die. There's the problem. If she snuck off and cheated on me behind my back, I couldn't live with her. I'd know why she did it, and I'd understand why she did it, but I couldn't live with that kind of dishonesty. The only solution, as far as I could see, was to approach this openly. But Tanya isn't the kind of woman who would agree to take a lover and go to the bedroom while I sit in the living room watching TV, knowing she's with someone else. She could probably do it with a stranger in a motel room where I wouldn't know about it, But she couldn't just do it with one guy while I'm around, then switch to another guy next week and another the week after that. We needed someone steady, someone we both cared about and felt comfortable with. We sat down and made a list of potential candidates, but we couldn't agree on anyone. We kept coming back to you, but we were afraid that if we started with you and Peg came back home, it would all end, and we'd have to start over. And make no mistake, Peg will eventually come back to you. Everyone who knows Adam White knows he's a jerk, and Peg will find out soon enough. She'll come back to you, convinced you have no idea what she's been up to. It's baffling why she thinks you're so clueless. My only guess is that she believes you love her so much that it wouldn't even cross your mind that she could be up to something. I couldn't help but smirk. She's pretty much right about me because that's how it was. It was only because the separation dragged on and on that I finally felt something wasn't right. Well, now you know, and I know that Peg is already history, even if she doesn't realize it yet. I know you won't take her back under any circumstances. That freed Tanya and me to come to you. Tanya, and I want a child, Rob, and Tanya needs intimacy. Until the doctors figure out and resolve my problem, someone else has to provide her with that part of her life. I know it sounds ridiculous, but you making love to my wife is saving my marriage. You just need to get comfortable with the idea that I know, and I'm okay with it. I didn't know what to say. The whole situation was so unusual that I found it hard to believe. Tom stared into his glass, then looked at me and said, "It kills me that I can't take care of my wife, Rob, but if I lose her, it'll destroy me instantly. I need you to do this for me, buddy, truly. Can I count on you?" I looked at him for a few seconds, then nodded in agreement. On Sunday, I invited Tom, Tanya, and 3 other couples over for a barbecue. When the other couples left, Tom went into the study to play on my computer, and Tanya and I went upstairs to my bedroom. By the time I undressed, Tanya was lying on the bed, begging me to hurry. I climbed onto the bed, leaned toward her, and she began to cry. "No need for that, baby," she whispered. "I'm already ready, and I need you now. This is my house, Tanya, and on my bed. We do things my way," I replied firmly. I leaned closer, letting my lips in touch explore her with care and intention. My movements grew in rhythm as her soft breaths and closeness encouraged me. Her body responded intensely, and soon, she was overcome with waves of relief and release. I stayed by her side, offering gentle support until her breathing calmed. "That was incredible," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "But now, I need you." Her quiet encouragement drove me forward, and together, we shared a moment of increasing passion. She held onto me tightly, her presence grounding me as we moved together. With every moment, our connection deepened, leading us both to a shared climax that left us fulfilled and content. Afterward, I adjusted her position with care, ensuring everything was aligned with our shared purpose. Smiling softly, I looked down at her, feeling gratitude and peace as we rested together. And Peg walked away from this. That woman must be either crazy or foolish. I could see that Tom knew what he was talking about. Tanya was incredibly passionate. It was hard for her to pull herself away from me the 3rd time before I saw her and Tom to their car. Tom shook my hand, Tanya kissed me on the cheek, and we all agreed that it had been a great day and that we should do it again soon. Any observer would have assumed we were talking about the barbecue. On Monday afternoon, I met with John Abbott from the Corliss Agency. As he handed me the report, he said, "Every time I do one of these cases, I hope it's just a misunderstanding and that nothing is actually going on. But here, there's no doubt. Your fee also covers our court appearance on your behalf if this ends up going to trial." I shook his hand, left the office, and on my way home, I found I wasn't as furious as I thought I'd be. Probably because I had already come to terms with the fact that it was true, and by the time I received the report, I had mentally resolved the situation. What would I do about this? Nothing I hadn't already planned. The only thing left was to finalize the line of credit before Peg found out, before it was too late. I'd meet with an attorney, prepare the paperwork, and hold off on filing it until I was fully ready. Over the next 5 weeks, we met with Tom and Tanya 3 or 4 times a week, either at their place or mine. They spread the rumor that I was going through a tough time and that they were spending time with me to cheer me up. Peg called me every week, but I stopped asking how she was or when she would come home. Finally, I'd had enough. I wrote checks against the line of credit, And once those were done, I found an apartment, moved out of the house, and handed Peg the divorce papers. Instead of citing adultery, the papers referenced the reconcilable differences. I arranged it so that Peg wouldn't know I was aware of White. She'd likely see it as my way of pushing her to make the decision to come back home. She'd call me, send some nonsense message about me overreacting, and then probably suggest meeting somewhere for drinks and dinner, where she'd try to calm me down and reason with me. I'd agree to meet her, listen to what she had to say, and then tell her I'd think about it. That would give me a few days to clear out the line of credit and empty the checking and savings accounts. Everything happened exactly as I expected. First, she called me and said I was being unreasonable, that there was no need to involve lawyers. I told her I was tired of that neither here nor there situation. You don't want to be with me, so it's time for me to accept that and move on. I agreed to meet her at Angelo's. It was the first time I had seen her since she left me, and she looked good that I was going to miss her. God help me, I really would, because it was clear to me that I still loved her. But even if she came back to me, I knew I could never live with her again. But I didn't tell her that. Instead, I sat there and listened as she fed me another line of nonsense. She told me she'd been seeing a therapist who was helping her understand blah blah blah, and Peg was making good progress. All she needed, she said, was a little more time. I know it's hard for you, baby, but it's hard for me too. Please, baby, just give me a little more time. I told her I'd think about it and let her know. I waited 2 days, then called my lawyer and told him it was time to move to the next step. He withdrew the divorce filing and sent Peg a notice that the filing had been canceled. Peg called me from work to thank me and said I wouldn't regret it. I smiled, knowing I didn't regret it, but she didn't know why. She would soon enough. That evening, I had dinner at Tom and Tanya's. After the meal, Tanya and I slipped away to her bedroom. As she laid out the blanket for me, she said, "Can we make love tonight instead of just having sex? I'd like to make love to the father of my child. Are you sure?" Absolutely. A home test told me on Tuesday, and the doctor confirmed it this afternoon. You're going to be a daddy. We only did it once that night, but it was slow, tender, and deeply fulfilling. When it was over, I told her I might not see her again for a while. I'm planning to end this farce with Peg and White this week, and I may need to leave town for a while. Don't do anything too drastic, love. I need the father of my child around. You mean Tom? You need to start thinking of him that way. You know what I mean, lover. Just because I got what I wanted doesn't mean I don't still need you. Adam White was a member of the Fraternal Order of Eagles, and ever since being elected Sergeant at Arms, he hadn't missed a single meeting. He left Wednesday's meeting in high spirits, having spoken with several influential members who made him feel confident about his chances if he decided to run for a higher position within the order. Still in a good mood, he stepped out of his car in the parking lot of his apartment complex. He locked the car door, turned around, and was immediately struck by blinding pain before everything went black. He was found by a neighbor who called 911. Paramedics arrived and transported him to the emergency room, where it was discovered that both his arms and legs were broken, and his equipment had been so severely injured that both bells had to be removed. He was in agony when he opened his eyes in a hospital room and realized he couldn't move. Both his arms and legs were in casts, and he was strapped into traction that he saw Peggy standing beside his bed with a look of horror on her face before blacking out again. Of course, I wasn't there, but I received a full account of what happened when a man entered the room. He approached Peggy, who was standing by the bed, staring at White. The man asked if she was Margaret Olson, and when she replied, yes, he handed her some papers and said she had been served. She was confused as she opened the envelope and saw that she was being sued for divorce, this time on the grounds of infidelity. She stared at the word infidelity and then at the broken man lying in front of her on the bed. Her face went pale, and an expression of fear overtook her as she realized what it meant. She groaned, "Oh my God," then sat down in a chair and began to cry. The police asked me where I had been that night. As it turns out, I was at a poker game that started an hour before the Eagles meeting and continued for another hour after White was admitted to the hospital. Peg paid for my alibi, though she didn't know it. The guys would have backed me up for free, but I used her credit to show my appreciation. A home improvement store charged her Visa card for the digital cameras I gave to Bill and Steve. eBay charged her MasterCard for the laptop I gave to Mike and the 19-inch flat-screen monitor I gave to Phil. She even paid for the aluminum baseball bat. I took a 2-month leave of absence. Once the police were satisfied that I had nothing to do with White's unfortunate incident, I went fishing in Mexico before leaving. I told my lawyer not to push for the divorce, just to leave things as they were unless Peg started resisting, at which point we'd drop it. We'd remain married, but I would have nothing more to do with her. I called Tom and Tanya once a week to check in, and they told me Peg had moved back into the house. From what they could tell, true love didn't seem to be in the cards for Peg and White, as she never went back to him after the day she was served with papers beside his hospital bed. The credit card bills started coming in, and she must have discovered that the savings and checking accounts were empty. The line of credit was maxed out, and the certificates of deposit in the bank safe were fake. That's when Peg desperately started trying to find me, but no one could tell her where I was. My boss, who knew the whole story, told her that I had quit. He said I just came in one day, announced I was leaving, and asked for my final paycheck. He didn't explicitly tell her that I left without notice, but he made her believe it. After calling my lawyer and demanding a meeting with me, she learned that I had dropped the divorce proceedings, paid him off, and that he no longer represented me. She had no other options. For months after I left for my fishing trip, she declared bankruptcy. Eventually, she lost the house and had to give up her Lexus, switching to driving a used Geo. When I returned from Mexico, I rented an apartment on the other side of town and made an effort to avoid places where she might see me. Tanya was 5 months pregnant and looked even more attractive than before, so we picked up right where we had left off. This time, we didn't have to worry about anyone keeping tabs on me, and 2 or 3 nights a week, she stayed over at my place, or I stayed at hers. Peg found out I had returned after about 2 months, and one day, when I got back from work, I found her waiting for me in the parking lot. She got out of her car and started walking toward me, but I ignored her, got into my car, and drove off the lot. In my rearview mirror, I saw her rushing back to her car, so I slowed down enough for her to keep me in sight. I was willing to talk to her, but not in the parking lot at work. I drove at a pace that made it easy for her to follow me, and about 10 minutes later, I pulled into the parking lot of Bud's Grill in Bay Arby. By the time she parked, I was already inside, sitting at the bar and ordering a Bud Light. She came in, looked around, spotted me, and started heading my way. She was already muttering something as she approached. "Don't think you can run away from me, you bastard." I know Peg, so I knew what she was about to do. I turned on my bar stool and caught her wrist mid-motion. I squeezed as hard as I could, and she gasped in pain as I said, "I have every reason to wish you harm, Peg, so don't push me too far. Keep your hands to yourself unless you want to feel real pain." I let go of her wrist and said, "I wasn't running from you. I drove slowly and carefully so you could follow me here. I wasn't about to air your dirty laundry in the parking lot where I work. Here, it doesn't matter, because everyone already knows you're an adulteress. I want to talk to you. I don't want to talk to you. I've already heard enough of your lies. I want my money back." "What money are you talking about, Peg?" "The money you took from the house, and half of everything else. It was mine, and I want it." "Well, you're not getting it, Peg. My stance on this is that it's compensation for what you did to me. What do lawyers call it when they file a lawsuit? Compensation for pain, suffering, and loss of spousal rights. I think what I took almost covers the pain and suffering you put me through. I went a year and a half without sex while you were giving it to someone else, and I was humiliated when everyone I knew looked at me as a foolish cuckold. Damn you, Rob, because of you I lost my family home. Oh, please, Peg, it couldn't have meant that much to you since you moved in with another man. This isn't about him. I want my money. Here's some news for you, Peggy. You're not getting a cent from me. You tried to play me, but you got caught, and I made you pay. Live with it. We'll see what the court says. It doesn't matter what they say, Peg. Here's how this will work. You'll have to hire a lawyer and sue me so the court can issue an order to divide the property. As soon as you file suit, I'll file a counterclaim. A good lawyer can drag the case out for 6 to 8 months, and all that time, you'll be paying your attorney. Can you afford to pay them without getting anything in return? I've got all the evidence I need to fight you in court, and if I win, you'll get nothing but trouble. The worst case scenario for me is that the court orders me to divide the assets. I say, all right, judge, and walk away. You and your lawyer wait and wait for the money, but it doesn't come. You call me, but I don't answer, so your lawyer, who you're still paying, goes back to court and gets an order requiring me to pay by a certain date. You and your lawyer wait again, and when the deadline arrives, you still don't get a cent from me. Your lawyer, billing you for their time, goes back to court and gets a judgment against me. I have no savings or checking accounts for you to seize. My car is leased, so you can't touch it. I live in a furnished apartment, so there's nothing there for you to take. The only thing you can do with a judgment is garnish my wages, and the first time my paycheck is garnished, I'll quit my job. So, what do we have here, Peg? Years of paying attorney fees out of your pocket, and all of it for maybe a couple of $100s from one paycheck. The only thing left is for you to go back to the judge and have them threaten me with jail time for contempt of court if I don't follow their orders. All you'll get, Peg, is a postcard from me, sent from some small fishing village in Mexico, where I'll be living until my money runs out. And thanks to you, I've got enough to last a while. Face it, Peggy, you cheated on me, you got caught, and I got even. Consider yourself lucky. Think about what happened to your boyfriend and count yourself very lucky. He lost his balls and will never be able to sleep with another man's wife again. You, on the other hand, can still mess around with anyone you like. I knew it. I knew you had something to do with what happened to Adam. What you think you know and what you can prove are two entirely different things, Peg. By the way, how's your little romance going? From what I've heard, you haven't seen the poor guy since his first day in the hospital. What's the point? You took away the only thing he had. Oh, that's harsh, Peg, even for you. It's the truth. He was very well endowed and a great lover, but in the end, I would have gotten bored with him and come back home anyway. Oh God, Peg, if only I had known. All this trouble could have been avoided if I'd known you'd eventually come back to me. Oh damn, I must have ruined everything with my actions, didn't I? I'll have to carry this regret to my grave. Oh, how joyful life could have been if we just communicated better. You can be such an asshole. Yes, Peg, and you're a worthless cheater. I finished my beer, stood up, and said, "Take care," before walking out of the bar. 3 days later, I was served divorce papers citing irreconcilable differences. I didn't contest them, and she was awarded half of the marital assets while I was ordered to pay back the money taken on credit. I wished her luck getting anything and tossed the final court order into the trash. She must have believed me when I predicted how things would go, because I never heard from her again. One interesting thing came out of all this mess. Everyone agreed that White was a jerk, but even jerks can have a friend or two, and one of us happened to be Peg's boss. He didn't like the way she treated White after his misfortune and decided to let her go. Well, not exactly let her go. The economic downturn required some downsizing, and Peg was laid off, but everyone knew she was fired. She couldn't find work in our area, so she moved to California, where she had relatives. Since then, no one, not even her sister, has heard anything about her. This story has one more chapter. It was a sad ending, but at the same time, a glorious beginning. Tanya gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, and Tom absolutely adored her, spoiling her terribly. Uncle Rob was a frequent guest and spent countless hours crawling on the floor with little Martha. Tom never told Tanya or me the full story. He knew the reason behind his erectile dysfunction, but kept it a secret, even from Tanya. He had cancer that wasn't caught in time, and it had spread. After his funeral, Tanya handed me an envelope. On the front of the envelope, it said, "For Rob's eyes only." I looked at her, and she shrugged, saying, "I have no idea. It's addressed to you, so I don't know what's inside." I opened it and read, "Hey, buddy, if you're reading this, I'm gone. There's a reason I chose you, yes, it was me, not Tanya, to be the father of our child. I knew I wouldn't be around for them, and I wanted someone I could trust to be there to look out for them. I knew I could count on you. Don't let me down, brother, take care of our girls." I handed the letter to Tanya. She read it and started to cry. I held her to comfort her, and she asked what I was going to do. "I'm going to do exactly what he expected, take care of my girls." 6 months later, Tanya and I got married.
Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.